Huge shout out to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. I watched a shoulder pet ranking a few days ago and I found myself saying, what? Every 45 seconds the entire time. This was such a baffling experience for me that I decided to crawl out of YouTube retirement and make another tier list. I'm breaking down shoulder mounts into 6 tiers and ranking them based on 3 criteria: their utility, versatility, and how fun they are to use. This list is primarily a PvE ranking, but I'm still considering PvP use cases. Without further ado, let's get started. Starting off with the F tier, I'm actually going to leave this empty. Shoulder mounts have some general utility that make having one pretty much always better than not bringing one along. These benefits include some serious weight reduction, being an on-the-fly meat shield, and being a little helpful for combat for basically no trade-off. So in my opinion, they're pretty much always a net positive, which means you can't really put it in F tier. With this in mind, let's just go to the D tier. Starting off the D tier, I have the Compy, which is pretty obvious to be honest. The only thing the Compy gets in its kit is a pack bonus, but when you're a shoulder mount, a pack bonus doesn't really do anything because it completely strips away the entire benefit of having a shoulder mount, which is that it's on your shoulder the entire time. A pack of Compies is never traveling fast enough to stay with you, that buff gets lost, 0 utility, bad stats. Just literally all the Compy has is the basic shoulder mount buffs, easily D tier. The Pegomastax is also a D tier shoulder mount because I'm ranking these creatures as shoulder mounts, not as overall creatures. Obviously the Pegomastax recently got a lot of benefits with the gacha stuff. It's always been a nuisance in the wild, but for a shoulder mount, it's just a little bit of a higher statted version of a Compy. In PvE, it just doesn't do anything utility wise on your shoulder. So for me, I just feel like this is a pretty self-explanatory ranking as well. And the Hesperornis, which is the next creature on the list, is also in that exact same category. The Hesperornis falls into the exact same problem as the Pegomastax because the best thing about the Hesperornis is that it drops polymer when you farm it and that it has golden eggs. Both of these things are not really relevant when it's on your shoulder. It has no utility on your shoulder, it has poor stats as a creature, and it also just looks fairly dumb. The reason I gave the Hesperornis a tiebreaker over the Pego is that at least while it is on your shoulder, it can still drop a golden egg very, very rarely, whereas the Pegomastax utility with the gachas is completely impossible when it's on your shoulder and you're moving around the map. The other thing to note about golden eggs is they've just become significantly less good in ASA versus ASE because of the bio grinder. Like, you can just get the extraordinary kibble by bio grinding down Ceratos, Udis. You just really don't need the Hesperornis golden eggs anymore, and it's still a pretty rare thing to drop. It wasn't a good creature in ASE, it's worse in ASA. To round out D tier, I have the Microraptor, which is a pretty tough one to place. It also has a pack buff like the Compy, but really all it is good for is dismounting players, and we're talking about PvE here. There is one other PvP specific shoulder mount that I'm just gonna put in a tier higher than this just because it's so much better in PvP, so I'm kind of using that as the tiebreaker. But the Microraptor really just is a better statted, completely useless version of the Compy in PvE. At least it's very fast. The Noglin genuinely might be the most useless PvE shoulder mount in the entire game, but it's so good in PvP that I'm just gonna put it in the C tier. I really don't know what to do with this thing like the Microraptor. It's just so broken at what it's made for. It kind of just felt wrong to put it in D tier. The Noglin, of course, is good for controlling creatures and enemy players, but controlling creatures with the Noglin is just kind of redundant when you're on a map like Genesis 2 where the Noglin comes from because you just have a tech suit anyway. In PvP, when you control a player and then you sort of use that player you're controlling to go shut down a generator or blow something up at their own base. But in PvE, those use cases don't get taken advantage of, and the strongest creatures in the game will just one-shot the Noglin if you try to control it. Good luck controlling a wild Giga with a Noglin, you are going to have a terrible time. Plus, all the stuff you can control in PvE is just something that you can tame in the game, which is a lot different than in PvP. You can't tame an enemy player, so that's a completely different situation where it actually serves a purpose. It's just not a creature that was made with the PvE mode considered at all. I think if they made the Noglin mind control not kill wild creatures after that period ends, and instead it just sort of releases the creature from the control, the Noglin would be a lot better in PvE for trapping tames. But as it is currently, it's just not very useful at all, and its stats are awful. Up next in the C tier, I have the Ichthyornis, which might piss some people off, but as an actual shoulder mount, it's definitely a lot more useful than the creatures we've already talked about. The Ichthyornis has active hunting modes where it can retrieve corpses and generates prime meat and prime fish meat passively whenever it goes and picks up a small tame. It can turn dodos into prime meat, it can turn any fish it kills into raw prime fish meat, so early game, it's actually pretty useful for getting prime meat for knocking out and taming creatures. Very annoying in the wild, of course, and not something a lot of people actually take advantage of, but I've actually had some pretty decent success in the past with it. The next shoulder mount I have in the C tier is the Dimorph. The Dimorphodon is actually pretty okay because it does really good damage, has decent stats, and the pack buff it comes with is a little more useful because the Dimorphs in your pack can actually keep up with you as you move around the map a lot better than something like, for example, a Compy, which is much slower and isn't flying so it can get stuck on obstacles on the ground. The Dimorphs, when in packs, can be sent at a lot of things in the game and come out unscathed. They're very strong, they do a lot of damage. They just lack the utility, which I think is the gap between this and a B tier shoulder mount. It just doesn't do enough, especially in PvE. In PvP, it does target the rider off the back of its mount and do damage to them, which is really, really good. But the only way that mechanic impacts you in PvE is when you're in a boss fight and you're losing half your health because a stupid skeleton bird is slamming into your helmet and costing you your life. Before I talk about the next shoulder pet, let me tell you about War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and right now it's completely free to play on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. You're looking at over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and warships across 10 major nations spanning more than a century of military history. From biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s all the way through to modern fighter jets and main battle tanks, War Thunder has it all. The game runs on Gaijin's own in-house Daegor engine, which heavily optimizes the game for smooth frame rates, and it has impressive visuals whether you're on a high-end rig or just something more basic. With over 95 million players worldwide already in the fight, the community and competition are absolutely there waiting for you. Play War Thunder for free right now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile by just hitting the links in the pinned comment or description to sign up. New players or anybody who hasn't logged in the past 6 months will get a huge free massive bonus pack on PC or consoles, which will include multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account time. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. The last creature I have in the C tier is the Archaeopteryx, because like the other shoulder pets in this tier, it really isn't good by any means, but it at least does something. In this case, it's pretty good for the tech cave. You can kind of just use it to go down through the entire cave. If you pump a couple points of stamina into it, it should do a decent job for you. And at the bottom of the cave, there is a spot where you can uncryo your actual boss fighting army, or if you want, you can just hover over the boss and shoot down on it. Both are very, very viable options. And although this creature is absolutely worse in a vacuum than pretty much every other creature on this list, as a shoulder mount specifically, because literally all it does is be a shoulder mount and collect tree sap, it's not too bad. Moving on to the B tier now, I would place these shoulder mounts as solidly good in most situations. The first creature I have in this tier is the Mesopithecus. The Mesopithecus throws feces that slows enemies, reduces healing, applies torpor, and deals damage. The projectile nature of this makes it basically a very, very bad tech shoulder cannon, but at least it slows down enemies. It's a little better in PvP because if you hit another player and they can't use med brews, that's very relevant to a fight. But in PvE, the slowing down of enemies is still definitely useful. The ranged effect is useful. The Meso also has another benefit where you can just tame one 5 minutes after spawning in. They're incredibly easy to tame, they're incredibly easy to find, so you can have this little companion with you the whole time. You can also slap a helmet on the Mesopithecus for extra survivability, which is nice. Lastly, the Meso also provides some insulation. It's not amazing, but it does provide both hypo and hyperthermal insulation, which is nice. Up next in the B tier, I have one of the highest damaging shoulder pets in the game, and it's the Vulture. The Vulture has amazing stats just like the Dimorph. It also targets riders just like the Dimorph, so they're pretty similar creatures in that way, but the Vulture has one thing the Dimorph doesn't, which is why I put it a tier higher. The Vulture is a fantastic preserving bin for meat specifically. It makes things like prime meat and mutton spoil 10 to 15 times slower than it would in your inventory, which is drastically better than most creatures. So having a Vulture on your shoulder while you're going around trying to tame things after you just killed an Ovis means you have a way better shot. Also, if you're trying to kill an Ovis and then carry that meat across the entire map to make it tame, keeping it in a Vulture's inventory will keep the mutton much more preserved. The only restriction is that you can't actually manually put any meat in the inventory of the Vulture besides spoiled meat, but if you just have it on Harvest the Corpse setting, it'll just do it for you, which is great. Not to mention, Vultures are incredibly easy to tame when you have spoiled meat in your inventory, which is also very easy to get. Also, just going back to the stats for a few seconds here, they don't get a pack buff, so they are weaker than Dimorphs when there's a pack of both of them, but individually, Vultures are stronger than Dimorphs most of the time. I'm going to divide up the 4 Drakeling types by season just because I think they are different enough where there's no point putting all 4 of them in the same spot. Before I talk about the first and lowest ranked Drakeling, I'm going to go over all the general abilities that all 4 Drakeling seasons have. All 4 variants share the core toolkit that makes Drakelings really great, including the XP transfer system that stores up to 30,000 XP points collected from kills while it's on your shoulder, and you can dump these 30,000 XP points into your tames to give them instant XP boosts. Once you hit the 5,000 XP threshold, you also start to generate the Dragon Horde keys, and the more XP you have stored up, the better keys you get. A full 30,000 XP tier key gives you an Ascendant tier chest, and on top of all of that, you also get native biome boosts of 10% XP gain and 10% loot quality increases while your Drakeling is in its own biome. This XP and loot quality boost also lasts up to 3 hours after you leave the biome, which is insanely good. The last ability every Drakeling has is that they all have a parachute ability, which lets you glide and still use your weapons midair. Another reason the Archaeopteryx is not good, because these are simply better than it. If Drakelings spawned on the island, the Archaeopteryx would have been in the F tier, by the way. Just sort of a side note I wanted to mention. Drakelings don't spawn on the island, so the Archaeopteryx's main use case of being good for the tech cave is not totally dismantled by the Drakeling existing. And all 4 Drakelings can breed too, which is not the case for every creature we've talked about so far. With all that being said, the worst Drakeling in the game, in my opinion, by a pretty wide margin, is the Autumn Drakeling, which I've placed in the B tier. The reason the Autumn Drakeling's in the B tier, even though in a vacuum it's better than a lot of the other creatures in this tier, is simply because using the Autumn Drakeling when you have the other 3 Drakelings available is just something that I have a hard time justifying. The Autumn Drakeling provides 5% melee damage boosts and a 15% harvesting boost for you when you're farming is just good in a vacuum, but when you actually think about it, you realize you're either going to be farming by hand, which at that point in the game, do you really need the extra 15%? Or if you're late in the game and you're using an RG and an Anki, a Karkinos and an Anki, any of those combinations, you really just don't care about the 15% because you're just going to go till you're slot capped anyway. And if you're on an RG or maybe a Magmasaur or something like that when the Magmasaur comes out in a few weeks here. By the way, that's just another reason I made this video. Gen 1 coming out soon is super exciting to me. I love that map. So if you are interested and excited for that map to come to ASA finally, make sure to subscribe. I'll make a ton of informative content as I do with every single map release. Appreciate the recent channel support. 30,000 subs is awesome. Let's get to 50k by the end of the year. Anyway, back to the Autumn Drakeling. It's just not really that helpful even if you're going till you're encumbered, because you're going to get there pretty quickly regardless. At least for me personally, I just never really got value out of the Autumn Drakeling. I think the other 3 are so good that it kind of pushes this one down the list further than it needs to be, but that's just the nature of tier lists. Up next for B tier, I have the Jerboa. The Jerboa is one of those pets that earns a spot in the B tier just because it's really useful on Scorched Earth. Warning you about the weather conditions just saves you a lot of time if you're going to get stuck in a sandstorm without one, and it's also just incredibly cute. Nothing really to say here besides stuff I've already said a million times in other videos. The utility is awesome. You can tame one in about 4 seconds, and if you're playing Scorched Earth, you're really going to want one. Perfect example of a niche creature which is excellent at one thing, easy B tier. Another really niche but fantastic creature are the light pets on Aberration. These are helpful for avoiding the obnoxious amount of nameless that spawn in the lower parts of the map in the blue and pink zone. They're great for weakening Reapers in an area. Obviously, now that the Cosmo came out, that can also weaken Reapers, but the light pets are able to do it, which is convenient. They have fantastic charge capacities as well, which means you can keep nameless and other threats away for a lot longer, and the only downside for these is Seekers will be attracted to you, but when you're stuck between a rock and the hard place, you'd rather have a Seeker attacking you than 27 nameless. They also make the nameless that are around you much weaker. I forgot to mention that along with the Reapers. The nameless being weaker is really helpful when there's 27 of them because they are pretty tanky when they're not weakened. Anyway, getting back to the 4 light pets now. These include the Bulldog, Glowtail, Shinehorn, and Featherlight. Utility-wise, these are all very similar. Accessibility-wise, obviously, stuff like a Featherlight's much harder to get than a Bulldog, but I'm going to rank them on how cute they are because that's how I always do tiebreakers for these 4. In my opinion, the Glowtail is the ugliest, then the Bulldog, then the Featherlight, and lastly the Shinehorn, which is substantially cuter than the other 3. If you disagree with me, that's okay. It's okay to be wrong. Moving on. The Ferox starts out my A tier, and it's really a very heavy pros and very heavy cons kind of creature. The pros include how adorable it is and your ability to turn it into a giant, fast, strong, very maneuverable beast that you can ride around on at a moment's notice whenever you feed it element. Being able to do this on the go is really convenient because you can basically go from just having a cute little thing on your shoulder that insulates you from the cold, and it turns into something that can get you out of a jam for element. That downside of having to feed the Ferox element is why it's only in the A tier. When you actually turn it into a rideable mount, obviously it doesn't really count as a shoulder mount anymore, but the fact that you can turn the Ferox into that beast at any time you want if you have element made me decide to include it in this ranking. It's kind of like the Pyromane for me. I'm just including this as part of its toolkit because you can do it at any convenient moment you want. The other benefit, although it does cost a lot of element to use this thing, is that it digs up element dust for you when it's not on your shoulder, which is pretty convenient because it'll pay for itself a little bit over time. The next creature I have in the A tier is the cat. The cat's in the A tier pretty much entirely because of its pest control ability, because it can scare off stuff like Ichthyornis, Pegos, Microraptors, and other small stuff that's just really annoying. The Microraptors especially are really helpful because even throughout the late game, a Microraptor stunning off your creature is always a pain in the ass. Obviously, most of the other stuff that gets scared by pest control really only matters in the early game, but Microraptors do matter the whole time. Other things the cat has in its toolkit are the ability to wear a helmet so it can get extra armor, the ability to breed, and the ability to have both 9 lives, which is awesome, so they just pretty much never die unless you're a really irresponsible owner. I also like the way that works. Just as a side note, they use that essence thing from the Oasis Orb, but you can just click it in your inventory, which is much more convenient than it like randomly appearing again out of nowhere. You can also just chuck them at things. It's kind of funny to watch when you do that. It's more funny in PvP when you do it, but you can throw this at things in PvE as well. Maybe not the best idea at all times, but you can do it. Also, somebody was telling me that Raz Clark killed a Titanosaur with this because the Titanosaur just couldn't hit the cat off of its face. I can't find the footage for that, but if that's the case, then this thing should easily be S tier. Killing a Titanosaur is just completely ridiculous. 2 more things worth noting about the ranking for the cat is I just don't like cats in real life at all. My cat that I had as a child was a complete asshole. And I'm still confused why they added domestic cats to ARK. Maybe it's just me that's confused about that still, but I know it was a joke, but it's still here. So why? Okay. I mean, cool. I know they like cats, but just feels out of place, you know? Whatever. Moving on. Up next, I have the second Drakeling on the list, and it's the Summer Drakeling. The Summer Drakeling gives you 10% movement speed and 25% CC reduction. But the most important part about the Summer Drakeling and what puts it in A tier is that it automatically cooks food for you and makes jerky for you automatically in its inventory. Being a portable cooking station on your shoulder is incredibly convenient, obviously, for a million different reasons. The main one, though, is just convenience. It's incredibly useful to always have cooked food ready to go in your inventory. Not needing oil to make the jerkies is also really nice. Of course, this is only an A tier and we haven't talked about 2 of the Drakelings, but it's really nothing against the Summer Drakeling. The Winter and the Spring Drakelings are just really good. Up next in the A tier, I have the Cosmo, but this one I'm pretty conflicted about. First, let's talk about why it's good before I say kind of why I may be putting this too high. It has a couple of amazing abilities, including swinging webs around like Spider-Man, which is amazing on Aberration. The movement tech with this thing is also awesome. There's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot of different techniques you can learn to get more value out of the Cosmo, which is really cool. I like when they add stuff like that to the game. And you can also do a couple other things with it, including slowing down enemies with a web shot and shooting a charged web at something like a Reaper to weaken it. With that being said, obviously there's a lot of great things about it, but there's 2 things that I think are kind of holding it back for me from being an S tier creature. First of all, it doesn't have an illumination buff like the other charge pets do, which is a huge loss. Yes, the charge infused web mode does scare Nameless, but from my experience, it's still more inconvenient having stuff spawn around you, even if it is scared of you, than just not having it spawn in the first place because of an illumination buff like the other light pets. This means that even though it is good at weakening Reapers, it's not going to keep Nameless off your ass the entire time, so unless you're swinging above the ground, you're inevitably going to have to deal with some of these Nameless, and it's just so inconvenient. And my other issue is, I think the Cosmo is a perfect creature for non-flyer maps, but on Genesis 1, which is where it's releasing next, I'm assuming the Cosmo will be there. The problem it faces is that the Bloodstalker is there. You can tame a Bloodstalker pretty early in progression too, and the Bloodstalker is just way better than the Cosmo. It has better stats, it has better mobility, it has better stamina management. It gets better momentum. It's far better in PvP as well because you can crush other players. Obviously, the Cosmo is not trying to compete with a Bloodstalker, but I don't think it's really going to translate to outside of Aberration. And A tier is pretty much as high as I can place a creature that's really only good for a couple of instances. Up next, I have the Pyromane, which functions pretty similar to the Ferox in terms of having 2 forms, but it is better than the Ferox. You can release it from your shoulder instantly without needing to feed it element. It's an incredibly strong creature. It gives you ridiculous insulation from the cold, and it's basically just a Shadowmane without some of the really OP Shadowmane PvP abilities like the stun, but you don't need that for a PvE ranking. The Pyromane's absolutely ridiculous. It's insanely good for the Lava Elemental Cave on Ragnarok. Post-recording Jace here, it's just ridiculous for any crouch cave because you can put it on your shoulder, crouch in, and then just deploy it back. I don't know why I just said Lava Elemental. Obviously, it's fantastic for that cave, but it's good for literally any crouch cave. especially after the cryopod changes where they're kind of annoying now about you using the cryopod to get a creature into the cave. Anyway, back to the rant. It's great for a lot of other caves in the game. It's strong enough to fight bosses if you just have a decent line of these things. You can swim in lava with it, which is pretty funny. And again, you can switch it between your shoulder and being on the floor really, really easily. It's kind of the perfect merging of utility and strength, while on top of having mobility as well. It's just a fantastic creature. There's only one reason it's not in S tier, and it's because I really don't, again, know how to rank these non-shoulder mounts, like the Pyromane and the Ferox. They're kind of shoulder mounts, they're kind of just mounts. I also really don't like that they charged $5 for a Shadowmane clone, so, you know, I never really put Pyromanes in the S tier on any of my lists just because I kind of do not stand with that. But yeah, it's a fantastic creature, it's a great creature to use, and it's really fun. The Gloon is the newest shoulder pet in the game, and I decided to put it at the high A tier instead of the S tier. First, let's go over all the new stuff it brings to the table, because it is the newest creature, just in case you're not aware of everything. It has an I-beam that deals increasing damage over time, a mesmerize beam, which confuses creatures and makes them stop attacking you, and instead target other things around them, a necrotic mark that taunts nearby creatures to attack your target instead of you, and on the passive side, you can turn on a permanent slow fall. You can turn on auto mesmerize, which automatically locks onto and tracks threats attacking you. And it also has a camo mode you can equip, which works similar to a ghillie suit. The auto mesmerize alone is incredibly useful for taming other creatures safely. And one more thing I like is that you're able to turn on the ability to track max level tames in your nearby area, just like the light pets from Aberration. Really nice touch. The main reason I have it in high A tier instead of S tier is because I think a lot of its kit kind of depends on you being on the ground, and usually the way I play the game is I'm very rarely not on the back of a creature. I do really like the ghillie ability, I love the slow fall that it has, but I need to play with it longer and sort of see more use cases for it come out of the woodworks before I put it in S tier confidently. Starting out S tier, I have the Winter Drakeling. The Winter Drakeling gives you a 10% damage resistance, ridiculous insulation, and it preserves your food similar to an ice wyvern, which is around the level of a steroid-infused fridge. You can just keep your kibble on a Winter Drakeling forever. It takes so long to spoil that if you ever want to go around and tame a certain type of creature, just keep all your kibble on the Winter Drakeling, and even if it takes you forever to find the creature you want to tame, you're good to go. Saves you that trip back and forth from your base when you're saying, why didn't I bring the kibble? Why didn't I bring the kibble? And you can also even put stuff like mutton on the Winter Drakeling. It's so good at preserving that even mutton can last a while. Anyway, that's enough talking about preserving. It's fantastic for the cold biome because you're never gonna freeze to death. It just solves a lot of problems better than any other creature in the game can solve those problems, so I put it in the S tier right at the bottom. Following very similar logic to why the Winter Drakeling was in the S tier, next up I have the Fjordhawk. The Fjordhawk also does something that no other creature in the game does, but in my opinion, this ability is just better and more unique than what the Winter Drakeling does. If you die, you can basically send a Fjordhawk to go pick up your bag and bring you all your stuff back. It is an incredibly useful ability, it is very simple. The design of the Fjordhawk is by far the best out of any shoulder mount in the game, it just looks badass as well. Another cool thing about the Fjordhawk is it actually has pretty decent stats too, so you're not really risking it dying unless you do something extreme. Certain spots in ARK, because this game is horribly developed, like for example the ice cave on Ragnarok, when you get to the end of it, will just anti-mesh you and kill you sometimes and your bag will drop into the mesh. So having something like a Fjordhawk to go send out to grab that artifact you just got and all your stuff is incredibly convenient. Just the only creature in the game that can solve that BS, so it's in the S tier. Can't wait for this thing to be back in the game. The third highest ranked shoulder mount for me on the list is the Spring Drakeling. Now before they nerfed it, it would have been number 1, but even after the nerf, it's still incredibly good. It gives you rapid health regeneration constantly, and it also reduces your stamina consumption. And on top of these two abilities, it can convert seeds into rare flowers in your inventory, which is really good. The regen of course got nerfed, it no longer activates while you're taking damage, which makes a lot of sense. The plus 1% / plus 15 health regeneration stat was just way too much because you could literally go into the murder snow naked with a Spring Drakeling on you and it would out heal that level of freezing. Even after the nerf though, I really do think this still offers the most utility out of any of the Drakelings. Call me wrong if you want, but if you combine Spring Drakeling plus Med Brews, a lot of the time you can out heal pretty much everything. It's not like the Spring Drakeling takes 27 seconds to start healing you after you stop taking damage. It's pretty quick still, the healing is very fast, and I also really appreciate the converting seeds into rare flowers thing, it just saves a lot of time. At number 2 I have the Otter. Call me nostalgic if you want, but I really do think the Otter is just one of the most well-rounded shoulder mounts in the entire game. It offers some of the best insulation in the game, is incredibly easy to tame about 5 minutes into a playthrough, is by far the cutest shoulder mount, and probably the cutest creature in the entire game. I literally have member emotes of this creature because it's that cute. And its best two abilities I haven't even talked about yet. First of all, its best ability by far is that if you pump melee onto the Otter, it just does better insulation for you. This is ridiculous because at a certain melee level, it is by far the best insulator in the game, and it's so good at insulating when you pump the melee that you can even use it as an AC, which obviously doesn't count for the shoulder mount thing, but I figured I'd mention it. At a certain melee level, Otters are pretty comparable to Dimorphodons, and they're way more space efficient, and Dimorphodons, the only thing they do is the AC thing, so that's kinda crazy their whole thing got stole by an Otter. The other thing that I love about the Otter is that you can hold multiple of the same artifact in its inventory. Every single time I play ARK, regardless of what shoulder mount that I'm using on a day-to-day basis, I always have an Otter sitting around at my base, just holding all my artifacts. It's so much more convenient to have it all in one place, and it's the only place in the entire game where I can put every single artifact in one inventory box. Did I mention this thing is cute? At number 1, I have the Sinomacrops. This might not be the most popular opinion, but I really do think the Sinomacrops is the epitome of shoulder mounts. It's by far the most fun shoulder mount in the entire game, has multiple fantastic pieces of utility, is adorable, is incredibly easy to tame, and has a wide array of use cases in both the PvE and PvP side of the game. The most notable thing about the Sinomacrops is that it comes with a full mobility system. It has flight, a double jump, a glide, and a parachute mode all in one. It functions like an early game tech chest plate and is a substitute that kind of lasts the entire game. It also has a pest control ability of its own, so whenever this thing comes out, the cat is going to be in some serious trouble on the next tier list. On top of all the things I'm talking about, the insane convenience, the clear use cases for things like this inside of a cave, inside of moving around the map, early game mobility, it also beats every other shoulder mount at the one thing that they all had: weight reductions. The standard weight reduction for shoulder mounts in the game is 50% off everything in its inventory. For the Sinomacrops, it's 75% off just because it's better than every other shoulder mount. It said, you know what, I'm already better than everybody else, why not add another reason to put me at the top of the list? You can also put a helmet on the Sinomacrops for more survivability. The only downside of the Sinomacrops is it has low HP, but with the helmet, honestly, it is tanky enough for a lot of situations. And this thing is right up there with the Otter in terms of how cute it is. When I started making this list, I put the Compy last, and I put this thing first, and then I worked my way in. I was never really going to put anything else here. Quick shout out again to War Thunder for making this video possible. Go play it for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using my links in the pinned comment or description. New accounts and returning players who've been away from the game for at least 6 months can still claim that massive bonus pack on PC or consoles, including premium vehicles, the Eager of Valor decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account time. It's only for a limited time, so don't forget to grab it. Well, that was my ranking of every single shoulder mount in ARK Survival Evolved and ARK Survival Ascended. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, you might enjoy this video on screen now where I ranked every single DLC creature in the game. Thank you to my members. Peace!